Hi, this is Heidi Cooper. I'm doing part B of this binge eating disorder presentation. It's been a pleasure to work with Janine. And I am referring to slides 7 through 12 for my summary, and slide 13 for the implications of social work, and slide 14 for my web resources. So here we go. Let's go to slide 7. The purpose of this Curtis and Davis research study is a qualitative study, was to show how obese women, both with or without binge eating disorder, and I will use BED, experienced symptoms that were listed in the DSM-5 as symptoms of substance use disorder addiction. So we're using substance use in general to describe food addiction. The literature review considered that few studies have taken a qualitative approach when comparing these substance symptoms to food addiction. For example, in the Kassin-von Ronson study, there were the substitution of the word food for drug in phone interviews during that study. So there's some data, but few in a qualitative approach. So the other one that they cited was Overeaters Anonymous studies, where participants used words. So here we're talking about the language addiction of the language words used in addiction. Physically addicted, hangover, withdrawal, and abstinence were used in these studies. Overall, the article said this study produced good evidence that food addiction can be addressed as a disorder with symptoms and psychiatric comorbidities, and very similar, remarkably similar to conventional drug abuse disorders. So on slide 8, sample and sampling, 24 obese women were interviewed face-to-face after they had been screened to determine that a group had binge eating disorder and 12 did not. Some inclusive factors where this was not inclusivity. Both groups were of similar age, body mass index, and ethnic composition, but in terms of inclusivity, they all needed to be fluent in English and free from anorexia or bulimia. So, for example, participants reported at least having weekly binges over the past 3 months, but during that period they had not vomited, fasted, or taken laxatives or diuretics to control their appearance or weight, which underscores the anorexia or bulimia diagnoses. So the results I'm going to share with you have to do with the criteria in the DSM-5 which participants endorsed with regard to their food addictions. And they're grouped according to ones that the two groups shared, those with and without BED, and then one that they did not share. And again, these symptoms were substance use disorder symptoms. Not the binge eating disorder symptoms as listed in the DSM-5. Okay, on to slide 10. Okay, so criterion 6. The substance is often taken in larger amounts or over a long period of time, a longer period than planned. Both groups, the BED and non-BED groups, talked of eating larger amounts of food, but what was unique in the BED participants, they focused on their uncontrollable aspect of binge eating. Likewise, in criterion 7, which is there's a constant desire or failed attempts to cut down on controlling the substance use, both groups experienced a desire to control the substance use, but the binge eating disorder participants expected this effort to be unsuccessful in terms of self-control, despite the strategies that they used. Criterion 11, there is a craving or a strong urge to use the substance. This was endorsed less often in the non-binge eating disorder group. And I made a note here that one woman said her craving felt like, and this was a BED, a binge eating disorder participant, her craving felt like how an alcoholic or a drug addict would feel. On to slide 10. Criterion 10, however, so we've looked at the ones where they're similar, but criterion 10, which says the substance keeps being used despite the problems it causes or what's made worse by the substance, this was only endorsed by women with binge eating disorder, unlike their counterparts. So that's where we have some differentiation. Lastly, with regard to their experiencing symptoms, under substance use disorder, those diagnosed experience clinically significant impairment and distress with regard to their symptoms. All BED participants reported distress related to their binge eating episodes. And consistently, those without BED were not experiencing clinically significant stress with regard to their eating. Okay, so we're on slide 12. This is the last article summary slide. A couple of conclusions. In general, obese women with BED are more likely to meet the criteria for food addiction when based on the symptoms for substance use disorder in the DSM-5. So those with BED. Some other conclusions that I thought were noteworthy were, one was a study by Davis et al. And Gerhardt et al., where they used this DSM-5 criteria with substance use disorder in conjunction with the Yale Food Addiction Scale. And there was substantially lower incidence of food addiction in those with BED. Another Davis et al. And Gerhardt et al. Study reminded that individuals other than those with BED can struggle with overeating and their tendencies toward food addiction. Some implications for social work. Francis, in his Essentials book, cautions that this new inclusion of binge eating disorder in the DSM-5 might cause it to be overused as a diagnosis. There's also the signs and symptoms being identified in a diagnosis may give clinicians an opportunity to discuss, assess, kind of give questionnaires to a named disorder with their clients. Another implication, the last one I've listed here, is that if you'll take note on one of those websites that I'll show you in just a minute, accessing a community of people that have a disorder like you have kind of reduces isolation and reduces shame. when found among communities. So when you're in a community among others who have the same behavior. Lastly, I'm going to address my web resources as contributor B. I listed, let's see, Psychology Today. I thought if people were searching, as I did, for binge eating disorder, they might consider Psychology Today. It's familiar. And contributors are national contributors. I found this Kronberg article. She described diversity of people who binge, as well as that people who are overweight may not have binge eating disorder. They may not be binging. She explained the shame around binging, which might help people be more compassionate. She described that it's not just the behavior outside, but the healing that needs to happen on the inside. I've got the National Eating Disorders Association website. I found that the homepage was really more enticing, inviting, in terms of community. And the bold access to the hotline. They even offered a Twitter chat for LGBTQ communities and eating disorders. I have the Binge Eating Disorder Association. It was a nice homepage, but it was kind of organizational and clinical rather than inviting. I really liked the helpguide.org website that I've listed here. Everything that you'd need was on this one page for binge eating disorder. It included, how to notice symptoms you might be experiencing, how to help others that you know who might be experiencing symptoms, and it included binge eating recovery tips. And lastly, I included the National Eating Disorders Collaboration, the NEDC, from Australia, again, to broaden the community, to show that there are symptoms across the world that people experiencing similar symptoms. So again, broadening the community and perhaps lessening the shame about the disorder. So thank you so much for listening, and we hope you learned a lot.